I'm Sean Taylor, and thank you for joining me for another episode of Hustle.Play.Love. More than anything, I want this show to be a place where people come to learn and to be inspired. My first guest is someone who inspires me. Angela Ford is a serial entrepreneur and big idea chaser. She has run and started several successful businesses. Then one day, she went to a Black newspaper to search its archives and photos for clippings of her socialite grandmother. She was blown away by the images of Black Chicagoans taken during the time when you didn't leave the house unless you were dressed to impress. There were images of celebrities like Joe Louis and politicians like Harold Washington, and slices of everyday Black life that tell the stories of who we are and where we've been. But then Angela couldn't believe these treasured pieces of history were improperly cataloged, not carefully preserved, and not easily shareable. So she created a business for the culture called the Obsidian Collection Archives to digitize images from Black newspapers, photographers, and institutions and make them available online. Please help me welcome Angela Ford. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Now, you know I love to tell this story, and I've told it a million times, and we have talked about this. So, you're my girl. You're my ride or die. I've been that way for a long time.
Yes.
And I love what you're doing. I've worked in newspapers. I've dug through archives. I've gotten my hands dirty, and it's fascinating. Mm-hmm. But these files get lost, they get cracked, they get crumbled. So is improper storage and cataloging, is that a common problem at newspapers, or is it just smaller papers that don't really have the budgets?
It's C, all of the above, right?
Okay.
As journalism evolved and computers took over the narrative, everybody had to kind of restructure. And so what you do first when you're doing your budget cuts and reformulating your organization is you leave the archives over there and you lock the door and you get back to that later. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of where a lot of our institutions are. We're going to get back to that.
Mm-hmm, but some of those locks got picked, and some people were. Some of those things disappeared. I'm talking treasured.
Constantly, there's a lot of stories about what happened to a lot of archives, and we're rescuing them one group at a time.
So for instance, earlier this year, I was trying to find a picture online of the Parkway Ballroom, like back in the day. Mm-hmm. No luck. How is this possible that I couldn't find a picture of the Parkway Ballroom online?
It's a big part of Black Chicago that people weren't just stepping outside and taking a photo of the building. You just didn't think. Now everybody's got 15,000 images on their phone. Mm-hmm. But back then, film cost money, cameras cost money. These things took effort. So the people that really took the photos were the newspapers. Mm-hmm. And the story wasn't, oh, look, a building.
Okay. Well, but I mean, even the inside, like, all the parties and the things you hear about that was going on at the Parkway Ballroom. So, for instance, I was editing a script for the Holocaust Museum. Mm-hmm. And these older Americans Black Americans here in Chicago, were talking about the Parkway Ballroom. So I wanted to show some imagery from there. It just wasn't there. And it got me to thinking, what you're doing is so important for us to be able to get to it. So tell us about the Obsidian Collection. How does that work?
Well, what you're talking about, your story of trying to find images, my story of finding images, I've been an entrepreneur for over 35 years, mm-hmm. and I said, oh, this must be what my third act is going to be about, right? Or my life in the third quarter of my life. Mm-hmm. I'm going to form this organization and put these things together for the next generation, because now we are almost completely digital. So if it's not digitized, then people won't see it.
They won't see it. Nobody's going to go to a newspaper archive and go in the basement and dig for it.
No. There's no time. There's no access.
There's no access. Right? Not that they would let you do it.
There's nothing built for that. So we have to kind of catch up with mainstream, mm-hmm. as do a lot of other cultures. I'm working as we build our infrastructure to how we do it. We're going to share that with other cultures so they can quickly get their histories online so that their stories are told more accurately.
So how do you start something like this, to start to collect these images? I mean, where do you reach out to? Who do you talk to get access?
So we started the organization 6 years ago, and we've gotten so much press and so much activity that we now get calls. We're actually, we have a line of institutions that we're going to work with. It takes so much for each institution, each organization to determine who owns those images.
Oh, right.
And all of the legalities. I tell people I've got more lawyers than friends, and I've got a lot of friends. But all I'm sure is that we legally post images that the person actually has a right to. Mm-hmm. So, because what we're doing is we're encouraging not turning your images over to a museum or to a public library or resource, but it's important that the Black community retain ownership, because that is part of the wealth. Now, I think everybody should retain their images, because anybody's uncle who was a famous gold rush guy, if you got that photo, one day that photo might be something, but that's part of your wealth, and we don't often think of that as part of our family wealth that should be handed down to the most responsible person in the family.
But it's family wealth, but it's also historical wealth. If somehow that image of that Black gold rush guy gets digitized and put on your website, and then so tell me, I want you to tell our viewers how you've really worked out this philanthropic piece to it, because it's not just, it's for the culture, but it's also for the people to sustain our storytelling institution.
So first of all, my son is not only grown, he's middle-aged, so I don't have, he's got his own. I know, right? It's shocking, but he's middle-aged. So I didn't need to do kind of the late stage capitalism, I'm going to make all the money and everybody's going to struggle model, right? Mm-hmm. So we put together a nonprofit arm that actually raises capital for digitization, because digitization is expensive, it's labor, somebody's got to put the picture on the scanner, and they've got to key in the appropriate metadata. And the metadata is the descriptions, that when it was, when the photo was taken, who the photographer was, the people in the photo, all of the details, because all of that makes the image searchable. So you can type in Parkway Ballroom, and then those images come up as part of it.
Okay, that's, great.
Yeah, in these modern times, our phones are geotagging everything. You take a picture, it's just like, oh, you're inside of so-and-so's bakery at this address, at this longitude and latitude, right? You know, at this day and time. So a lot of that is done, but those vintage images, all of that stuff has to be added.
You travel all over the world. You went to London. You took this show on the road. Tell me what you did in London with the Obsidian.
I did. I love London. London, in the UK, Black History Month is in October. And so we launched in London last year, learned a lot about culture, because we will probably launch in 2 countries in Africa next year.
Oh, great.
Because everybody has thousands of images, and they're like, oh, good, you're doing that. But one of the hot Black communities in London is Brixton Village. And this wonderful marketplace gets about 27,000 people a day, because it's on a main travel part of the tube, which is RL, you know. And so we partnered with some Black female photographers there, and showcased their images throughout Brixton Market. And we are stockpiling a list of partners that will add their images to our platform.
Oh, that sounds great.
Right, so that the world can see the Black diaspora, you know, the way we see ourselves.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's important. So you've got another big idea that you started on. I want you to talk about. I mean, your ideas just keep getting bigger, Angela.
Listen, I am not without ideas.
This is a mansion-sized
big
idea.
Right.
The Lou Palmer Mansion.
Yes.
Just give us a little bit update on what's going on with the mansion.
So when we started working with these octogenarians, these brilliant photographers that had these brilliant images, they were, where are you located? And we were like, oh, it's digital, you know, it really doesn't matter. And for them, it's, oh, it matters. You know, so, ma'am, you're gonna need a building. So one of the things, we decided that the perfect location for the Obsidian Collection archives would be the historic Lou Palmer Mansion in Bronzeville. So this is a 135-year-old mansion that has been offline for almost 20 years.
Wow.
Lou Palmer passed away in 2005, and his wife Georgia 2006, or 2004 and 5. It's one of those. But they, Lou Palmer was the famous journalist of Black Chicago. He was the Oprah before Oprah in Chicago, and so we thought the place of a great storyteller would be a great place to revitalize, and then also make it a friendly membership place that people, content creators, could hang out all day. And with my middle-aged son, whom I've mentioned, I don't know if we remember that coffee shop where those guys, those black men, were arrested. Oh. You know, and so I'm traumatized by stuff like that every time I see things, and I thought, well, where's my son going to be able to hang out?
To be able to hang out,
where after a few hours it doesn't start looking uncomfortable. You know, and so this place is will be state of the art. You know, we are raising the capital to rehab this 20,000 square feet.
How can we help? How can the public help? How can we get involved?
Well, I think the donations would help. Listen, that's
let's start there.
Yeah, the donations to the obsidiancollection.org, number one. But number two, for me, it helps when each viewer starts looking at their own archives. And talk to the oldest and the youngest member in your family.
Right. You might have something there that can be used. And so
but also just amplify in your own family the importance of archiving history. Because we'll just repeat stuff over and over if we don't talk to each other and, you know, and learn from what we did.
Well, thank you so much for what you're doing. You're building a legacy for the community. Thank you very much. We'll be right back.
On the next Chicago Newsroom 2.0, we'll take a closer look at the current state of Chicago with journalists and roundtable regulars Samantha Thomas and Francia Garcia Hernandez.
How do we support communities in need? How do we make decisions with communities?
Join the conversation Wednesday at 7 p.m. on CAN TV, cable channel 19, or stream live on cantv.org or on the new CAN TV Plus app. Experience the power of community television.
You can dance. In my house. Raise the soul in my house.
As a musician and composer, to be able to say that you produce healing music for the soul that promotes wellness and spiritual empowerment is a tall order. Well, my next guest has conquered that mountain many times over and continues to share his craft with fans around the world. He is Chicago's native son, who is the leader and founder of the internationally renowned Ethnic Heritage Ensemble and the Ritual Trio. He has recorded more than 60 acclaimed projects worldwide and performed with some of the biggest names in the business: Stevie Wonder, Gene Ammons, Nina Simone, Donny Hathaway, Nina Cherry, and Dizzy Gillespie, to name a few. In 2014, he was knighted by the French government for his contributions to the arts internationally. And in 2024, the composer and multi-percussionist celebrates 50 years in music, starting with a world tour that kicks off in January that will take him to 27 cities in the US, Paris, Brussels, and Canada. I am speaking about none other than Dr. Kahil El'Zabar. Welcome to Hustle, Play, Love.
Oh my goodness.
Or should I call you Sir Kahil El'Zabar?
No, you're just going to call me what you call me, Kahil.
Okay, I'm just going to call you Kahil.
That's right.
Welcome. I'm so glad that you're here.
Sean.
When you first told me about your tour schedule, I just thought, my God from heaven, how do you do that many dates that many days in a row, it's going to be like, what, 6 weeks of constant playing and travel.
Yeah, done it for a long time. You know, the band, Corey Wilkes and Alex Harding, all the guys are much younger than me, so they still hang out after the gig. I go to the hotel, and they're like, "You're not hanging out?" No, done that already. I'm going to sleep so I can play the next day. Exactly.
Well, I was so happy to see that you will be playing in Chicago at Promontory Point on February 1st.
Yes.
So you are sharing yourself with the world, but we get a good piece of you first, okay?
I'm excited to do my first gig in my hometown.
I love that.
Yeah.
So speaking of traveling abroad, you spend a lot of your time overseas, and I've always been a jazz head, and my dad's kind of started me with that, and just always intrigued about the way jazz musicians back in the 40s, 50s, and 60s left America, and they'd moved to places like Paris and London to escape racism in this country. And a lot of them said, hey, they got way more love abroad than they did in the United States. Is that still the case to a certain extent?
To a certain extent. I mean, not just, musicians, it's just that artists are usually kind of free thinkers, and they move in a unique way through life. And so Europe is a little more accessible to a creative lifestyle, especially with people of color. And, when we think about it, Louis Armstrong is really our first international ambassador. Before, people in the world knew about a lot of things in America. They knew about jazz in the 1920s, and they knew about Satchmo. And he brought humanity, he brought dignity, and I think that image that he brought created an excitement through the 20s, 30s, and 40s for the unique character of intelligence, articulation, and creative expression of jazz musicians.
I just saw Paris Blues not too long ago, and now every time it's on, I can't
Great movie.
not
Sidney
watch
Poitier,
it.
Paul Newman, Joanne Woodward, and Diana Carroll. Great movie.
and Satchmo does an appearance in that film too.
And
That's
Duke
very, very
Ellington
important.
scores it.
And Duke scored that?
Yeah.
Oh God, no wonder I loved it.
It's a great movie.
I'm such a huge fan of Duke Ellington. So in 2024, you're going to be celebrating 50 years in music, which is hard to believe sitting here looking at you. You look like you just, started maybe like a couple years ago. You're very well maintained gentleman. You're releasing a new album though, and it's called Open Me, and I got a feeling that title means something really special to you. What does Open Me mean?
Well, at 70 years old, I still want to be fresh. I still want to feel that there are things to receive. And the only way you can receive in life is to be open. And, great artists that I've always admired, like Duke Ellington and Miles Davis, they never stop changing. They never stop growing. So in my lifestyle, in my fashion, in how I travel, now having my kids that are in their 30s to their early 50s, I still want to be able to talk about what's happening from how they see things and learn from that. To do it, I'm asking the Spirit to open me and allow me to grow.
I love that. And speaking of continuing to grow, you've got a project coming up with Mos Def.
Yeah, we're
Tell us
excited
about that. What's
about
that going to be like?
Well, we have a big concert in Paris on the 20th of January, and then the next day we fly to Tunisia with the entire band, the Ethnic Heritage Ensemble, and we've been invited to collaborate and create this project with the most prolific Yasin Bey, known as Mos Def. I'm really excited about this time in life because many of the younger popular artists are looking at deeper roots now. And a lot of folks have discovered me during the COVID period because everyone was on the internet discovering art and music and things like that. And so Mos Def, Dave Chappelle, Erykah Badu, Beyonce's sister Solange all discovered me on their own. So I'm saying, like, after doing this for 50 years, for these mega stars that say that what I'm doing has value to them, it codifies that it's worth the long route, sticking to your guns, believing in what you're doing, and maintaining the truth about how you express yourself.
Absolutely. So when can we expect to be able to see what you are putting together with Modes?
Don't know yet.
You don't
right?
know yet?
No,
Okay.
it's like this is a collaboration. I just find it interesting. I mean, Andre 3000 did a all instrumental record, and it outsold in the first week both Nas and Lil Wayne. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So society's changing, looking for things in a creative, spiritual way. I'm excited and hopeful right now.
That's
Very
awesome.
much so. Yeah.
Now, for several years, since 2008 actually, you've been an artist in residence in the city of Bordeaux, France.
Yes.
Well, that's an incredible honor and also a commitment because that's an annual thing, right?
Yes.
So how do you spend your time there?
Oh, I spend my time running around shopping. I teach at the Conservatoire de Bordeaux, which is the University for the Music. I also do workshops at the Theatre du Bordeaux. I work with the Association of Mayors, and so that's the southwest of France. So cities like Cognac, Marignac, that's why the liquors are named, because it's the names of towns. And so I have to put together projects that are interdisciplinary with visual arts, music, dance. What were the two? I can't remember the name. There were two sisters from Bordeaux. They Nubians.
Oh, La Nubienne.
They were my students.
Really?
Yeah, so
Oh,
they
I
were
love
in the
them.
first residency that I had there. So I learned a lot. You know, Bordeaux was the largest slave port in Europe. So what we see in New Orleans in architecture and ironwork, all of that started in Bordeaux. The culinary development of African cuisine into European aesthetics that starts with Bordeaux. And I didn't know those things till I became an artist in residence, so I've learned a lot there. The first jazz club was open because people don't realize the First World War, the American Army was segregated, and so black soldiers weren't allowed to congregate with white soldiers. So the white soldiers were sent to Paris, and the black soldiers were sent to Mont-de-Marsan, which is right across from Bordeaux. And so the first jazz club in Europe, because the brothers had come during World War I, and they introduced this beautiful music to Europe, which then became in the 1920s, all historians and anthropologists call the 1920s the jazz age. So that's a testament, I think, to African American culture that's not really recognized.
Right, exactly. You know, it's so interesting because we were talking a little bit before we went on the air about my first guest and about, you know, preserving history and those archives and that sort of thing. And, you know, just hearing you talk, just imagine how much we're not getting that we were doing overseas that we haven't seen. There's so much history and legacy that we've built over there that a lot of African Americans don't know anything about.
Yes.
And don't have any access to.
Yeah. Well, you know, we have to realize that there are 6 times as many people of African descent in Paris as in Chicago. So we are a much larger presence than we realize in the world. And if we're that large of a presence, then obviously we have to be that much of an influence. So I really love the interview you did earlier and the importance of archiving and digitizing everything now. And I think there's just going to be a plethora of information that will inspire future generations for people all over the world. Humanity is in every culture. And when we think about the African American, we never think about them having an ethnic heritage. When we think about blues and jazz and rock and soul food, they become commodities of the economic modicum of society, but they were of the blood, guts, and roots of the African American experience, which is an heritage. So that's why I named my band the Ethnic Heritage Ensemble, because no one had ever identified that the African American, just like any other culture, has a heritage.
Has a heritage. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
Now, when we first talked about you traveling abroad, you mentioned shopping, and you're a fashion icon. You are a lover of fashion, and you bring a lot of things home with you. Tell us about that love of fashion.
Well, you know, it's like, you know, I started traveling to Europe in the early 70s, and so Yohji Yamamoto, Jean-Paul Gaultier, Terry Mugler were all the same age, 70, 71. So in the early part of my career, was the early part of their careers. And my mother owned a business in the 60s called Ask Gwen in Evergreen Plaza. And so she did bridalwear. And so my brothers and I learned to sew when we were very young.
Oh, wow.
I later designed clothes for Nina Simone, for actress Frida Payne. So I always had an interest in fashion. And then when I was in Europe, I met these young fashion icons who have become legendary today. And we're still, we're still friends and associates, those that are still living. And so I go to many of the shows. I'll go to the January shows this year with Pharrell and Nick Cave and I, the artists. We're gonna go hang in Paris for those shows. I go to Milano, I go to the New York shows, and I see art, no matter what the discipline is, fashion, dance, music, it is all the opening of the spirit in different ways. And we adorn ourselves, not just for ego, it's a celebration of God through our essence and how we dress, how we feel, how we speak. And in the African American tradition, it was always important to be clean.
Right? When we were just talking about that,
Yeah.
like, those images that Angela, was looking at, and when she shared them with me,
Yes.
I'm like, people will go to the grocery store with, coats with fur collars and hats and, topsiders and
Presence and style.
presence and style.
Yes.
Yeah, how we represent, how
Right.
we show ourselves to the world is very important. Wow, I would just want to go. Can I go? I want to go.
Let's hang.
I want to go. I want
Let's
to hang.
Yeah, we invite friends all the time. It's like
Yeah.
my residency this year in Bordeaux, about 8 friends, a lot from Chicago go, because I've had this fortune of traveling around the world for over 50 years, and now some of my friends from childhood are retired. It's a great time for them to hang with me and see things, and then my kids, friends and my kids, they travel, so traveling just opens you up as a human being, right?
It does.
So I
love
love having friends come hang. So let's do it.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Okay, so we can't forget, you will be here in Chicago at Promontory Point, February 1st.
Yes.
Okay, that's the only show in Chicago?
Only show in Chicago
For this tour.
the Black History Month Ethnic Heritage Ensemble 50th anniversary celebration. So I'm hoping to see everybody at the Promontory.
And it's going to be a celebration all year long.
Yes.
All year long. Chicago treasure. Thank you, brother.
Oh, thank you for
Thank
having
you so
me.
much. We'll be back.
Open my eyes to the light of understanding. Open my eyes to the true command.
I'm Ugo Walta, host of the program 3 Questions With. We often associate homelessness with images of individuals sleeping on the streets, in tents, or under bridges. But there's a less visible form of homelessness that is just as prevalent, if not more so.
Because they're not considered literally homeless, they're not counted. It's an invisible population that's just sitting there in a very dangerous situation.
Join us on Wednesday at 7:30 in the evening via Channel 19, streaming on cantv.org and the Can TV Plus app.
Thank you for taking time out of your busy day to tune in. I hope you got some inspiration from today's guests. There was a common thread between them. Did you get that? The thread is for the culture, uplifting Black history, uplifting self-awareness and self-preservation. That can be through healing music that promotes wellness, or that can be through archival images that must be preserved and shared for the treasures that they are with generations to come. Come back and join us next Tuesday night at 7:30 on your local cable access channel. Catch us streaming on cantv.org, or you can watch on the Can TV Plus app. Episodes will be live on Can TV website, or if you miss one, check the website out the next day and the show will be there waiting for you. Until next time, stay on your hustle, play like you mean it, and love like there's no tomorrow. I'm Sean Taylor. Good night.